and looking forward to welcoming not just Asfoorah from Australia this week, but also as part of our coverage here on Racing TV, Kirsten Duke from Sky Australia, who will be alongside our presenters during the morning. For you, Chris, the Australian filly Asfoorah or Big Evs to confirm the form from Goodwood?
I'd love it to be Big Evs, but I think it might go the way of Asfoorah. I think the market has this right, with Asfoorah as favourite. You've got to take into account, as much as anything else, the weight swing that we've got here on Friday compared to at Goodwood. At Goodwood, Big Evs was in receipt of £5. This time around, he has to give £1, and there was very little between them in the end.
Big swing over 5 furlongs, isn't it?
It is a big swing, and I think that can ultimately make the difference. Now, if you look at the way that Asfoorah goes through the race, this is a very sharp 5, and she's not struggling for pace to go through it, is she? She travels through it kindly, and yes, she can't quite get to Big Evs, and I agree that Big Evs was always holding her, really. And Tom Marquand kind of the opinion afterwards that even if she'd have got a bit closer, Big Evs would have pulled out a little bit more. I don't doubt that, but I do think that there is so much speed on here, and yes, it is a track where the pace can hold up really, really well, but I don't think that Asfoorah will have a bother sitting up with that gallop, and I just think that she can wear them down late on. I hope I'm wrong, and I hope that Big Evs wins it, but I can see why Asfoorah is favourite, and if I was pricing it up, I'd have a favourite too.
I mean, there could be, if this breeze continues all the way through the week, and I'm talking to Anthea, it seems as though it will. It sounds as though it's going to be very, very gusty through the 4 days. And with that in mind, William was teeing up the possibility the other day that Batash's track record could even be under threat if we don't get too much rain, with Living the Dream and Pontos and all just like bowling along up front. Big Evs probably in that mix as well. You want a horse that's going to be able to latch onto that pace and not get too far out the back, but he's also going to finish off the race strongly, and that's where Asfoorah really comes into it.
Exactly, and I think that probably is how it will play out. The wind direction will have to change from what it is at the minute, but I think that's forecast to do.
Well, it's kind of coming a bit across.
Yeah, it's across and half against, whereas I think the forecast is for it to end up being a tailwind, and if that happens, it will blow them along, and the time will be very quick, because unless they get a little bit of rain, it's going to be quick ground. It's going to be, if it is a tailwind, and with all that pace, I mean, Pontos is remarkably quick.
Yeah, if there were 4 furlong races, he'd be an absolute good thing.
It'd take a good bit of catching. But as you say, you've got Living the Dream, who burnt them off last year. You've got Pontos. Big Evs, you would imagine, will sit in behind them and try and pick them off. And it might be that he's even more comfortable going that gallop, and he might secure first run on Asfoorah. I can see that scenario playing out, but I just don't think she was short of pace at Goodwood.
Mick Appleby raised an interesting point on the Sunday programme. He said, we've got our York Hoodoo to get over. Now, the horse has won at York, Big Evs. He won here at the beginning of the season, but he was just all right that day when he was winning. And, of course, he blew out as a 2-year-old in the Nunthorpe last year. Does that worry you at all?
It doesn't, because I think ultimately it's a track that will suit him. I do think, for all that we've had 2-year-olds that have run well in the Nunthorpe with all the weight that they're getting, it goes back to the earlier points when you're looking at the fillies against the colts. I mean, going back to last year in the Nunthorpe, in the paddock beforehand, he looked diminutive compared to the rest of the field. Now, he's not a big horse. He's a stronger horse than he was last year anyway. He's filled up. He hasn't necessarily gone up a massive amount. But as a juvenile, he was physically immature compared to his rivals that day. And I think that and just being in a different type of race for the first time kind of caught him out. I like the fact that when he came here earlier on in the season, and the fact that he didn't lead at Goodwood, gives them options. He isn't just a blast and go horse, because if he was, and if that's all he'd done, you'd be worried that with Pontos and Living the Dream that it was just going to be a burn up and something would drop away. They have got more options to not have to do that with him now.
Now, there was a lovely bit of cooperation at the Breeders' Cup last year, if you remember. Adam West, who trains Living the Dream, the Nunthorpe winner last year, lent Mick Appleby his bell. Mick used Adam's bell to very good effect, and that enabled Big Evs to get out of the gate quickly in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf Sprint and win the race. Now, they were in different races, so it didn't matter. I suspect Adam's going to be keeping hold of his own bell this time, because they're up against each other.
Well, there's nothing going off when the stalls go off, so it doesn't matter quite so much here. But it did in America. But yeah, I do think Living the Dream has been a little bit of a forgotten horse in the sprinting ranks this year, and I think the way that he ran at Goodwood was the sign of a horse who was back because he finally had conditions in his favour. He definitely wants quick grounders living the dream, and he, so far this year, until he got to Goodwood, he hadn't really had what he wanted.
And he ran well at Goodwood.
He ran really well. Now, he needs to step forward from that again, and he's not going to be able to stretch away quite like this when he won the race last year, because he's got Pontos like he did at Goodwood. So it is a little bit different for him, but he's a speed horse, and this is a speed track, and you wouldn't be discounting him. I think it's an intriguing race.
No, I think Bradsell's going to win this time. Bradsell was third last year, red colours here, and of course he was in the wrong part of the track for most of the race, and Holly Doyle had to angle him over, and he could never really get a draft in behind Living the Dream.
And he's another one that is fast enough to latch on, but he'll see his race out.
That's what I'm thinking.
Again, he is probably a little bit of a forgotten horse in that we didn't see him until a couple of weeks ago at Deauville, so he hasn't been around for much of the season. I think it's a real, I don't think there's an absolute standout star in this division, but I think it's a deep one with not many horses, with a lot of horses that don't have a huge amount between them, but they're all classy. I wouldn't rule out Regional either.
Well, I wouldn't rule out Washington Heights, the horse your brother put up at 33 to 1 to win the Abernant.
Yeah, again, I mean, that was sort of pace assisted, the way that the track was playing at that time, wasn't it? And he got the right ride for it. But yeah, we know that the margins are tight here. But ultimately, I think it's landed on the right favourite. It's another no-bet race for me. I'd love to see Big Evs win it. I hope
how many no-bet races do you want?
Well, how many races have we got this week? We've got 28, haven't we? I can find a few that I don't want to have a bet in.
At least 6 no-bet races already.
What, 3? responsible gambling, Lucky.
Shall we? Well, fair enough. Let's see if we can blow the moths out of your wallet in the Gimcrack, shall we?
Yeah, well, the Gimcrack and the Lonsdale Cup. I'm happy to put something forward.
All right, the Albasti Equiworld Dubai Gimcrack Stakes. Here we are, 3 to 1 each of 2. Shadow of Light and Big Mojo. The Striking Viking, who I think will win, is 7 to 2. With Andersight, Camille Pissarro 5 to 1. K Burn is 8 to 1. 9 to 1. Shadow Army 12, and bigger the rest.
Oh, you put him up as well, so I'll back out.
Oh, back up then. Back up.
No, I like the Striking Viking here. I thought the way that he ran at Goodwood was exceptional, really, in the circumstances, because they absolutely charged along here, and he was just in behind what was a really good pace, and he was arguably over racing a little bit. He gets nailed by one coming from the back in a race that ultimately, aside from him, it was horses that were further back that came to the fore, and I just think he was a good bit better than the bare result. I think this track will really suit him. I don't see the race going quite the same way as it did here, and I think it'll make a difference to the Striking Viking, who was so impressive here when he made a winning debut in the Midland Park colours earlier on in the season. Obviously he's changed hands and he's changed stables since then, but there's nothing wrong with this bit of form on its own. The defeat at the Curragh I thought was an excellent effort in defeat, and I think that he can get back to winning form, because I think he was a good bit better than the bare result at Goodwood, and he very nearly managed to win. All
right, the Striking Viking then in the Albasti Equiworld Gimcrack Stakes. And what about the Lonsdale Cup over 2 miles? I think this is fascinating, because there's so many different ways you can slice this. We'll take a look at the market now. Point Lonsdale in the Lonsdale Cup, up in trip 15 to 8. Vauban 5 to 2. Which Vauban will turn up this week? Gregory 3 to 1. Is he finally getting there, do we think? What did you make of his Goodwood Cup run? Alsa Kib 8 to 1 on the up still. Night Sparkle 10, Align the Stars. Quickthorn was extraordinary in this race 2 years ago, 12 to 1. Al Nair 16 and Tashkan is 25. You could take pretty much any view here.
You can. I'd take the one that Point Lonsdale up in trip might be classy enough to see them off. I don't think Gregory's very quick. I thought he got a really good ride at Goodwood. It was an excellent run behind the standout stayer in Kyprios, but I think he was seen to good advantage as that race went. I don't think...
Should Gregory have held on for second here? Was it a bit disappointing he didn't?
To an extent, yes, but I think he shows enough to make you think that he's steadily stepping forward. The time was good, and he is capable, but he's just not that quick. Now, to some extent, you don't need to be, but I do think that Point Lonsdale maybe has a little bit more class. Now, I know he hasn't always gone with a huge amount of exuberance this year, Point Lonsdale, but you look back to the Ormond and the way that he powered home, and he just looked like a horse that could improve as he went up into the Cup races. They didn't do that with him. He went to Saint-Cloud over 1.5 miles on his next start, and it's not like he ran a bad race. He wasn't beaten that far behind Dubai Honour, and I just reckon that up in trip it'll really suit him.
And he's a brother to Broome, who did do well when upped in trip, particularly in the Dubai Gold Cup, posted a wonderful performance.
Yeah, and I think there's, assuming that Quickthorn takes his chance, then he's going to make it a nice, honest test.
If Quickthorn Model A turns up and not Quickthorn Model B, then he'll just about win again and win at a big price, but you just don't know.
I think Vauban's better over a bit shorter on the flat myself. I think he'd probably be fine 2 miles here, but I think 1 3/4 miles is more his trip on the flat, to be honest. So
you'd be more confident coming straight off the back of the Gold Cup run than you would straight off the back of this, wouldn't you?
Yeah, you would, and this was back over 1 3/4 miles. It was a bit of a strange race in a way, wasn't it? But I think he's going to have to better his form from this season as it stands in order to win this. And I just have Point Lonsdale down as a fairly classy horse. I often, perhaps wrongly at times, but I'm a bit of a sucker for the horse that's got the middle distance class that I think will stay, because I just think that sees them through when you get to this level.
Better horses.
Yeah, and I think fundamentally, could the likes of Vauban and Gregory, who are the two main rivals to him in the market, could they do what Point Lonsdale has managed to do over 1.5 miles? I don't really think they would. I do think Point Lonsdale will stay. As you've mentioned, it's backed up in his pedigree as well. I really like his chances. I think he's quite a good bet at 15 to 8.
So another cracking race comes up Friday afternoon, the Lonsdale Cup. There are no duff ones amongst them, the ones that we've looked at so far, and Point Lonsdale is the appropriately named selection for Chris Dixon.
Watch live racing now on racingtv.com.